From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
For the people of Laos, the war did not end when the bombs stopped falling. 80 million cluster munitions did not explode. They were spread across farmlands, jungles, villages, rivers. So for the last 4 decades, Laotians have continued to live under the shadow of war.
As President Obama becomes the first U.S. president to visit Laos, we'll look at the legacy of the U.S. bombing campaign during the war in Vietnam. The U.S. dropped at least 2 million tons of bombs on Laos. That's the equivalent of one plane load every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years. This week, Obama pledged $90 million to help clear Laos of unexploded U.S. bombs. We'll speak with an investigative reporting team who visited Laos and say it's not enough. Then the Obama administration's launched a new push to approve the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership.
I believe it will be ratified because it's the right thing to do. I believe that we'll get it done, but it's always going to be hard. Nothing's easy in the U.S. Congress right now.
This comes as 200 of the country's leading economists and legal scholars have written a letter urging Congress to reject the TPP, citing its controversial investor-state disputer settlement, the so-called ISDS regime. Critics say the provision creates a parallel legal system granting multinational corporations undue power. We'll get reaction from Public Citizen's Lori Wallach. And the standoff at Standing Rock. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Scientists say they've linked climate change to torrential rain and flooding along the Gulf Coast, such as the deadly flooding in Louisiana in August. The flooding last month killed 13 people and displaced tens of thousands from their homes. Scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and others say global warming makes it at least 40% more likely the U.S. Gulf Coast will be inundated by historic downpours. August was the wettest month in Baton Rouge in 174 years. When record-keeping began. This comes as both Guatemala and Greece experienced deadly rainfall and flooding. In Guatemala, at least 10 people have died in mudslides amidst intense rainfall outside Guatemala City. This is a local fireman. Meanwhile, flash flooding in Greece has killed at least 4 people amidst torrential downpours in the southern and northern parts of Greece. In news from the campaign trail, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both spoke at a national security forum held on the Intrepid, a decommissioned aircraft carrier in New York City Wednesday night. This is Donald Trump.
I've always said, shouldn't be there, but if we're going to get out, take the oil. If we would have taken the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS, because ISIS formed with the power and the wealth of that oil.
How are we going to take the oil? How are we going to do that?
You would leave a certain group behind, and you would take various sections where they have the oil.
Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton said she would not deploy ground troops into Iraq and Syria.
We are not putting ground troops into Iraq ever again, and we're not putting ground troops into Syria. We're going to defeat ISIS without committing American ground troops.
There are already thousands of U.S. troops currently in Iraq and Syria. Donald Trump's running mate, Indiana Governor Mike Pence, has contradicted Trump, saying he does not question whether President Obama was born in the United States. Over the years, Trump has repeatedly made false claims that Obama was not born in the U.S. Speaking to reporters Wednesday, Pence said, quote, "I believe Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. I accept his birthplace," Pence said. Donald Trump, however, did not revise his position during a Fox interview with Bill O'Reilly on Tuesday.
Do you think your birther position has hurt you among African Americans?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't even talk about it anymore, Bill, because I just don't bother talking about it.
Record,
I don't know. I guess with maybe some. I don't know why. I really don't know why. But I don't think very few people. You're the first one that's brought that up in a while.
Over the years, Donald Trump has been a key figure in the birther movement. In Mexico, the finance minister has been ousted following Donald Trump's visit to Mexico City, where Trump met with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. Finance Minister Luis Videgaray was the main architect of Trump's visit, which sparked outrage across Mexico. Only hours after Trump and Peña Nieto's meeting, Trump gave a fiery anti-immigration speech in Phoenix, where he pledged to deport 2 million people within his first hour in office. President Obama continues his historic trip to Laos, where he briefly spoke with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte ahead of a dinner. The informal meeting came after Obama canceled a more formal sit-down with Duterte after the Philippine president called Obama a son of a whore. Meanwhile, while taking questions at a news conference in Laos, Obama was asked about the Dakota Access Pipeline by a Malaysian woman.
My question is, in your capacity, what can you do to ensure the protection of the ancestral land, the supply of clean water, and also environmental justice is upheld?
Well, it's a great question. As many of you know, the way that Native Americans were treated was tragic. And one of the priorities that I've had as president is restoring an honest and generous and respectful relationship with Native American tribes. I can't give you details on this particular case. I'd have to go back to my staff and find out how are we doing on this one.
This comes as resistance to the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota builds across the United States. A group of nearly 20 canoes has launched from Bismarck, North Dakota, and is making its way down the Missouri River on a 3-day paddle to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. One of the canoe crew hails from the Tlingit and Haida tribes in Alaska. In Minneapolis, dozens of people protested at a U.S. bank branch on Wednesday, demanding U.S. banks stop funding the Dakota Access Pipeline. According to an investigation published by Little Sis, U.S. Bank has extended a $175 million credit to Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the pipeline. Meanwhile, Green Party presidential nominee Dr. Jill Stein and her running mate, human rights activist Ajamu Baraka, are facing misdemeanor charges in North Dakota after Dr. Stein spray-painted "I approve of this message" on a bulldozer, and Baraka spray-painted decolonization on another piece of equipment during a protest Tuesday against the pipeline's construction. Baraka and Stein will only be arrested if they return to North Dakota. And more details have emerged about the standoff on Saturday. While it is not yet known which security working for Dakota Access was responsible for attacking Native Americans with dogs and pepper spray, it's emerged that one of the security guards on site may be an Air Force and Army veteran who now works with a security company called Torchlight USA, LLC. Torchlight was founded by a former Marine officer, Eric Kirsch, whose LinkedIn profile says he went on to do private consulting for the State Department. Internal company documents say Torchlight provides, quote, consulting and direct support to U.S. government, NATO coalition, and corporate initiatives, unquote. The security guard, Landon Steele, is listed on Torchlight's website as a company officer and advisor. He appears to be the same man photographed multiple times at the site of Saturday's conflict, at times holding a dog. Britain and France have pledged to build a, quote, big new wall in the French port city of Calais amidst an increasing crackdown against the refugees living there, many of whom are seeking to reach Britain by stowing away on trucks, on lorries headed through the Channel Tunnel. As many as 7,000 refugees are currently living in the Calais refugee camp, despite French authorities' repeated efforts to attempt to close the camp. The proposed 4-meter-high wall will seek to block refugees from entering the port's main road. This comes as a new UNICEF report says 50 million children have been displaced worldwide. The number of unaccompanied children who have applied for asylum has tripled between 2015 and 2014. To see our full report from Calais, France, from the camp known as the Jungle, the largest refugee camp in France, go to our website at democracynow.org. In Connecticut, a judge has ordered the state to fundamentally overhaul its public education system, saying Connecticut is, quote, defaulting on its constitutional duty, unquote, and has, quote, left rich school districts to flourish and poor school districts to founder, unquote. The ruling is a response to a decade-long lawsuit arguing Connecticut has failed to provide adequate funding for its poorer school districts. But Wednesday's ruling goes far beyond school funding and instead forces Connecticut to change everything from teacher pay to graduation requirements, in addition to school district financing. In California, the Oakland Police Department has fired 4 police officers and suspended 7 others amidst a massive scandal in which multiple Oakland police officers are facing allegations of statutory rape and human trafficking after allegedly having sex with an underage girl. The revelations, which began in June, rocked the Oakland Police Department, forcing the ouster of 3 police chiefs within a week. Oakland city officials announced the firing and suspension of the police officers on Wednesday. However, none of the officers so far face criminal charges, despite allegations they engaged in statutory rape and human trafficking. And on Wednesday, immigrants held a sit-in at the office of Hillary Clinton's vice presidential running mate, Senator Tim Kaine, in Manassas, Virginia. Among them were 2 women formerly held in family detention centers in Texas. They called on Kaine to take action to release 27 mothers who've been held with their children at the Berks Family Immigration Prison in Pennsylvania, in some cases for more than a year. Senator Kaine's office responded with a letter calling for 5 of the families at Berks to be allowed to live with relatives in Virginia. Activists say the letter is the first step toward a private bill that would automatically defer their deportations for the rest of the congressional session while they seek asylum. In related news, children held at Berks say they will begin a strike against their studies on September 15th. If authorities do not respond by then to an ongoing hunger strike by their mothers to push for their release. The date is celebrated as Independence Day in Central America, where many of them are from. In a letter signed by students from 7th to 11th grade, who have been detained almost 400 days, they say, quote, "It hurts to know that as the school year starts, we are here imprisoned, when one of the reasons why we left our countries is that we could not attend classes because of the threats that schools receive. We have a hard time concentrating because of the frustration we feel to be here in jail as criminals, when in reality we are not," unquote, the children said. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin today's show with President Obama's historic trip to Laos, the first trip there by a sitting U.S. president. Obama has so far refused to issue a formal apology for the secret U.S. bombing campaign in Laos during its war on Vietnam. From June 1964 to March 1973, the U.S. dropped at least 2 million tons of bombs on the small, landlocked Southeast Asian country in what would become the largest bombing campaign in history. That's the equivalent of 1 plane load every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day, for 9 years, more than were dropped on Germany and Japan during World War II. Laos authorities say as many as 1/3 of these bombs did not explode at the time. This week, Obama pledged $90 million to help clear Laos of the unexploded U.S. bombs.
For the United States, one of the wars from our history is the conflict called the Vietnam War. It's a long and complicated conflict that took the lives of many brave young Americans. But we also know that despite its American name, what we call it, this war was not contained to Vietnam. It included many years of fighting and bombing in Cambodia and here in Laos. But for all those years in the 1960s and 70s, America's intervention here in Laos was a secret to the American people, who were separated by vast distances and a Pacific Ocean and there was no internet, and information didn't flow as easily. For the people of Laos, obviously, this war was no secret. Over the course of roughly a decade, the United States dropped more bombs on Laos than Germany and Japan during World War II. Some 270 million cluster bomblets were dropped on this country.
Experts estimate Laos is littered with as many as 80 million bombies, or bomblets, baseball-sized bombs found inside cluster bombs. Well, since the bombing stopped over 4 decades ago, tens of thousands of people have been injured or killed as a result. In 2013, Democracy Now! Spoke to Tumi Silamfan, a bomb accident survivor and victim assistance advocate. He explained how a bomb exploded when he was an 8-year-old child collecting bamboo shoots.
One day, I need to find some bamboo shoots to feed my family to make soup. So, when I started bamboo shoots and I tried to dig in for bamboo shoots, after that, the bombie exploded to me.
What you call a bombie, like a bomblet, exploded?
Yes, because that time in my village or in that areas, we have a lot of the bombing, and we don't know the bombing underground. And when we dig in for bamboo shoots, and it exploded to me. Yeah, and it's good. I lost my left hand, and that time is very, very difficult for me to continue my life.
For more on Laos, we go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we're joined by Karen Coates and Jerry Redfern. They are co-authors of the book, Eternal Harvest, The Legacy of American Bombs in Laos. They're both senior fellows at the Schuster Institute for Investigative Journalism at Brandeis University. Their new piece for Medium.com is titled, Obama's $90 million for bomb clearance in Laos, It's Not Enough. Karen Coates and Jerry Redfern, welcome to Democracy Now! Welcome back. Jerry, let's begin with you. Your response to the $90 million that President Obama has pledged to help Laos clear itself of these unexploded bombs.
First off, I'd like to thank you for having us back on, and good morning to both you, Amy, and Nermeen. The $90 million that Obama pledged at first sounds like a lot, but really when you run the math and do the numbers, you see that it's actually a fairly nominal increase in the overall spending that America has been spending for the last several years for cleaning up the problem in Laos. And when you put it in context of the amount of UXO, the amount of unexploded ordnance that remains in the ground and in Laos at this point, it's really a fairly small amount.
And could you specify, Jerry, how much, as a percentage, of these bombs have already been cleared?
Nobody knows. That's kind of the problem. The numbers that everybody talks about and that you brought up, they're accurate as far as we know. That said, we also know that that is the low estimate of it. The 580,000 missions, we know that there were many more. The records that the 580,000 missions came from were incomplete. Large parts of the data source originally were destroyed and are missing. And we also know that large numbers of airplanes that were sent to do bombing runs in Vietnam, for example, came back over Laos to bases in Thailand, and on their way back would randomly drop their loads in Laos. And we have no records whatsoever of those loads that were dropped. So we don't actually know how much was dropped in the first place. We know it's more than the numbers that we talk about, so we can't say as a percentage at all how much has been cleared to this point. To this point, in terms of land in Laos, roughly 1% of what they think, of what many experts believe to be the contaminated area in Laos has been cleared at this point.
In 2013, Democracy Now! Spoke to Manashia Thor, who leads an all-women bomb clearance team in Laos. She explained what her work entails.
So every day as an all-female demining team, we go out and we dig and try to find bomblets on land where people live and farm and work. So she's just emphasizing the importance of the job and the importance of clearance because it's people's livelihoods and it's people's lives. If they don't work the land, they don't eat.
How did you choose to do this? This is incredibly dangerous job.
เวียกตัวนี้นี่เป็นเวียกที่อันตรายหลายเนาะแต่ว่า
It's very dangerous.
แต่ว่าถ้าหากว่าอันค่อยกะย้านคนอื่นกะย้าน
I'm afraid, other people are afraid. And so this work is necessary because there's so many bomblets and it's so dangerous for the people in the country, and so it's necessary work.
I asked Manashia Thor what message she has for Americans.
รายการมาทัวร์ครั้งนี้ก็คือว่า
Yeah, this is an opportunity to tell the American people about what is going on in my country and the problem of UXO. So the war might have ended 40 years ago, but for the people of Laos, it really hasn't. It's still very alive for many of us in Laos today. So the hope is that as people hear and understand the problems, that there will be more support, there'll be more awareness, and that we will get additional support to do our work.
That was Manashia Thor. Karen Coates, President Obama announced the $90 million. Do you know how they arrived at this number?
I honestly don't. It's hard to say.
While he announced this, he did not quite offer an apology to Laos. Now, again, the amount of bombs that we're talking about that were dropped on this tiny country. If you can explain, one of the things that we said was the U.S. dropped at least 2 million tons of bombs on Laos, the equivalent of one plane load every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years, more than were dropped on Germany and Japan during World War II.
Yes, so I think what you're getting at is you're asking how much will perhaps the increase in money be clearing going forward. And we know that it's a bit hard to say because it takes different amounts of money to clear different types of ordnance when it's in the ground. We know that last year, roughly overall, there was $40 million, or this year is budgeted for roughly $40 million for clearance in Laos. I think I have that right. And if you're to divide up 90 million by 3 over the 3-year period, they're talking about increasing roughly $30 million a year going forward. When we sort of did a back-of-the-envelope calculation yesterday and the day before on how much extra clearance this can do, Obama is roughly saying, and again, this is just a back-of-the-envelope calculation, maybe another 225,000 pieces of UXO, another 225,000 bombies to be cleared from Laos. But if you look at the overall guesstimate number of perhaps 80 million, some remaining in the ground in Laos, you can see that that's just a tiny fraction of what remains in Laos at this point.
And Karen Coates, can you talk about the fact that President Obama did not issue a formal apology for this bombing campaign and its continuing legacy, and whether you expected him to issue a formal apology?
I did not expect him to issue a formal apology. I don't think that that is typical of what American presidents do in a situation like this. I think that the Lao people would have loved to have heard an apology, but I'm not sure that they necessarily expected one either. But what I do know from talking to many Lao people over the years is that they welcome his presence. They welcome the opportunity to create a new relationship with the United States, as President Obama has outlined. And so I have a lot of questions going forward as to what exactly is going to come of his statements about working with the Lao people, the Lao government, to help develop the country, which is exactly what the Lao people, when we've talked to survivors of accidents and people who have survived through the bombing campaign, what they say today is that they want to put the war behind them and they want to grow in the future, and they would love the help of the United States government in doing that.
And Karen, one of the less-known impacts of these bombs is on the access to food in the country, because 80% of people in Laos rely on their land to grow food. So could you talk about that? What has the impact of that been on people there?
Well, the presence of unexploded bombs it's an incredible impediment to food security, because if you have bombs in your field or the possibility of bombs in your field, you're afraid to go out there and dig. it's dangerous to dig in most of Laos, and as a farmer, you have to do that every day. So people are constantly putting their lives at risk. And there are large tracts of the country that could be put to agricultural use, but haven't been for 40 years because of the presence of bombs.
I want to go back to Tumi Salamfan, bomb survivor and victim assistance advocate in Laos. He spoke about the legacy of the U.S. bombing of his country.
We know as well the war is ended and stopped many years ago. But now, UXO continue to kill and injure people until now. And that is why we want to involve for the legacy of war. I think legacy of war is very, very important for the Lao people, especially for the UXO clearance and for victim assistance in Laos. Because now we have more than 100 times UXO export in Laos. And now we also have many survivors, they're just waiting for support and help.
That was Tumi Salamfan, bomb survivor and victim assistance advocate in Laos. Jerry, your final comment as President Obama leaves Laos.
I'd like to say that there are approximately 15,000 people who are direct victims of UXO accidents still living in Laos to this day, who were physically directly affected by exploding ordnance. But actually, millions of people in Laos still live in fear of UXO on the ground. So just saying that there are only 15,000 is a bit of a misnomer, perhaps. It's something that Obama brought up. That said as well, I'd also like to say, not to come off as this being completely bad, it is great that the United States did offer more money to do further clearance, but we just feel that he could do more. He could have offered more.
Jerry Redfern and Karen Coast, co-authors of Eternal Harvest, The Legacy of American Bombs in Laos, senior fellows at the Schuster Institute for Investigative Journalism at Brandeis University. We'll link to your piece at medium.com. Obama's $90 million for bomb clearance in Laos. It's not enough. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, Lori Wallach on President Obama's efforts to get the TPP passed through Congress. Stay with us. That's Laotian music here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We turn now to the Obama administration's new push to approve the Trans-Pacific Partnership, known as the TPP. This comes as more than 200 of the country's leading economic and legal scholars have written a letter to Congress urging them to reject the trade pact, citing its controversial investor-state dispute settlement, the so-called ISDS regime. Critics say the provision creates a parallel legal system granting multinational corporations undue power. The letter states, quote, foreign corporations can succeed in lawsuits before ISDS tribunals, even when domestic law would have clearly led to the rejection of those companies' claims. Among the letter's signatories is Obama's Harvard Law School mentor, Professor Lawrence Tribe. Senator Elizabeth Warren, an early opponent of the deal, said of ISDS, quote, this provision empowers companies to challenge laws and regulations they don't like with friendly corporate lawyers instead of judges deciding their disputes. Congress should not approve a TPP agreement that includes ISDS. Speaking in Laos on Wednesday, President Obama said the deal should be approved.
On the merits, it is smart for America to do it. And I have yet to hear a persuasive argument from the left or the right as to why we wouldn't want to create a trade framework that raises labor standards, raises environmental standards, protects intellectual property, levels the playing field for U.S. businesses, brings down tariffs. It is indisputable that it would create a better deal for us than the status quo.
That statement that he made in China before going to Laos, where he made a similar one, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a massive proposed trade deal that would encompass 12 Pacific Rim nations, including the U.S. and 40% of the global economy. U.S. presidential nominees Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Dr. Jill Stein have all said they oppose the TPP. The deal has faced years of public protests by those who say it benefits corporations at the expense of health and environmental regulations. To talk more about the TPP, we're joined by Lori Wallach, Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, author of The Rise and Fall of Fast Track Trade Authority. Lori, welcome back to Democracy Now! So here you have President Obama in China saying neither the left nor the right has ever convinced me, made a good argument for why this should not be approved. Your response?
Elizabeth Warren and over 200 of our nation's leading economics and law professors made a very compelling argument. Were the TPP to go into place, literally thousands of multinational corporations would be newly empowered to be able to sue the U.S. government in front of panels of 3 corporate attorneys who could order the government to pay unlimited sums, including for those corporations' expected future profits paid by us taxpayers. And all the corporations would have to do is convince those lawyers that some U.S. federal, state, local law, regulation, court ruling, government action undermines the new rights and privileges that the TPP would grant them. And there's no appeal from these panels. These lawyers decide, and there's no limit on how much they can order taxpayers to pay. And if the TPP were to go into effect, literally overnight, the U.S. liability to face those attacks by multinational corporations would double. There'd be 9,000 new companies who currently have no ability to do this, from the big Japanese manufacturing and financial firms to the Australian financial and mining companies, and timber companies are all over the U.S. If you go to tradewatch.org, we have a map with all of those companies, and you can click and see, look, here's a company that would newly be empowered. So that is the answer to President Obama. 9,000 multinational corporations that newly could attack our laws, raid our treasury, undermine our health and safety.
Lori, can you talk about Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe? He's one of the signatories to the letter, and his relationship with President Obama.
Well, often President Obama describes Larry Tribe, who I also had for constitutional law at Harvard Law School, as his mentor. And Professor Tribe was one of the eminent signatories of this letter. And he was joined by other very prominent legal scholars in basically saying, many of them, by the way, including the economics professors who are supporters of free trade, and they're all saying, whatever you think of trade, the fact that the TPP includes this outrageous system that would empower multinational corporations to skirt our domestic law system, second-guess even our Supreme Court, raid our Treasury over policies that our courts, our Congress have said are totally fine. This alone makes the TPP unacceptable, whatever else you think about the other arguments made in its favor. And so the fact that Professor Tribe, who obviously President Obama respects, is part of this demand to Congress to oppose the TPP is important. And this letter follows up in a letter last year with fewer bigwigs signed on to it, but just the same, a letter that had a lot of law professors saying, listen, we are against the ISDS. Take it out of TPP so we don't have a problem with your agreement. And of course, the president, as you'll recall, was extremely dismissive and scornful about that letter, said they're making stuff up and they're absolutely wrong, and so left this horrible corporate regime in the agreement. It's at the heart of the agreement. It is the key in the agreement, and now all these professors are against.
Could you talk about, Lori Wallach, the timing of this letter and what you think the likely impact will be?
So what is extremely perverse, and as economics professor Sachs, who was on a press call yesterday with Senator Warren and other signatories, said, was right now you have the president and the cabinet officials and Vice President Biden running around pushing TPP in conflict with, and to the peril of, some would argue, the election goals of Hillary Clinton and her prospects for winning in certain states where these issues are very important. The lines are being blurred. But also many congressional and Senate candidates are also running strongly against the TPP. And the president is right now prioritizing trying to get a vote after the election in the lame duck period. And this should be a signal to almost every American what's up here. This is an agreement so repugnant that members of Congress do not want to vote for it. Even the ones who support it for the corporations do not want it on their record before an election. So as Americans, we all have to think, what does that mean for us? What does that mean as our duty? Our duty is to get every member of Congress before the election to tell us what is their position on TPP. The only way there isn't a vote in the lame duck period after the election, when the retired and the newly fired get to come back unaccountable to you, the voter, and have a vote, is if we get them on the record publicly now, and particularly your House members. Find your House members. They will be back all of October up until the election, but every weekend in September they're going to be there, and they're going to be there for long weekends because it's election season doing public events. We have to get them to eyeball us and say what their position is, get them to say they're against the TPP. That is the only way there will not be a vote passing this agreement, slimy style, in the lame duck.
Senator Tim Kaine's position, has he been asked specifically about this, whether he would vote in the lame duck?
Well, what's fascinating is, of course, Senator Kaine voted for the authority, fast track, to have the TPP negotiated. And he was asked shortly after being selected by Clinton, what's his position on TPP, because he is a big free trader. And what he said is pretty much what the law professor said yesterday, which is, there's some things in there I'm happy with. I think they're good ideas about having this kind of an agreement, but I cannot live with the investor state corporate tribunals. The dispute system, as he called it, in there is not acceptable to him.
Can that be taken out?
Well, that's what's interesting. So Secretary Clinton has said that she doesn't support the TPP, and there are 5 things she said would have to be altered. And the TPP's investor state system is really sort of its heart. So yes, it could be taken out, and some of the other things that she'd mentioned are the big goodies the corporations want. So yes, there could be a real honest-to-God trade agreement that's about cutting border taxes that hasn't become hijacked by all this other corporate garbage. That's an agreement I suspect wouldn't face a lot of opposition.
What would that take?
But that would be something very different. That would be a very different agreement than what is the TPP.
And finally, were you surprised by President Obama using, well, his trip to China for G20, Laos for the Southeast Asian Nations Summit to push so hard for TPP? Does this signify something to you?
Well, on the one hand, it signifies what all the polling shows, which is the TPP is super unpopular in the U.S., and majorities of Democrats and Republicans don't like it. So I guess maybe he's going to get a more welcome greeting pushing the TPP someplace in Asia. But it also shows to me how dead serious he is about pushing this thing. So we've seen some of the Republican congressional leaders who are negotiating to get Obama to make certain changes in the agreement for their different corporate donors. And they've been saying things like, oh, we're not going to have a vote. Folks, don't believe that for 2 seconds. That's negotiating. That is negotiating. The fact that the cabinet was fanned out during August recess across the country, crossing paths with Democrats who are trying to get elected, undermining, they're saying they're against TPP by saying the top Democrats for TPP, and that all the corporations are starting to throw money into it. And today, this very day, there's a meeting at the White House that they've called in all the corporate lobbies to gear up for a fight for TPP and the lame duck. This fight is on. And the only way we, the people, are going to stop TPP, which we've gotten very close to doing against all odds, against all that power, is we must find every member of the House of Representatives, wherever you live, look in the blue pages. Call their offices and find out when they have open houses. Ask where you can meet your member of Congress in your area. They're doing lots of public events. They're all up for re-election. It's House members that count. Go shake their hands in a parade. Don't let go until you get them to eyeball you and say they will vote no on the TPP.
Lori Wallach,
we have to do it before the election.
We're going to have to leave it there. Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, author of The Rise and Fall of Fast Track Trade Authority. This is Democracy. When we come back, the standoff at Standing Rock. Stay with us.
Sometimes it seems that way to me. It's easy to love, don't you see? Sometimes it seems that way to me. It's easy to love.
Easier to Love by Sister Sledge here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We turn now to the standoff at Standing Rock. On Saturday, September 3rd, the Dakota Access Pipeline Company unleashed dogs and pepper spray on Native Americans seeking to protect a sacred tribal burial site from destruction.
This guy maced me in the face. Look, it's all over my sunglasses. Just maced me in the face.
These people are were threatening all of us with these dogs. And that woman over there, she was charging him and it bit somebody right in the face.
The dog has blood in its nose and its mouth.
And she's still standing here threatening you.
Why are you letting her dog go after the protesters? It's covered in blood.
Over there, with that dog. I was like walking, throw the dog on me straight, even without any warning, you know? Look at this. Look at this.
The
dog did it, you know? Look at this. There. So did it.
To see that full report of Democracy Now!, which has gone viral on Facebook, more than 11 million hits, go to democracynow.org. Only a few hours before the attack, we sat down with Standing Rock Sioux tribal historian LaDonna Brave Bull Allard to speak about another attack against her tribe. This was more than 150 years ago. On September 3rd, 1863, the U.S. Army massacred more than 300 members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in what became known as the Whitestone Massacre. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard is not only the tribal historian, she's also one of the founders of the Sacred Stone Camp, launched on her land April 1st to resist the Dakota Access Pipeline. We met her this past Saturday on her property at the Sacred Stone Camp.
We just came from the main camp, and there was a yellow helicopter hovering overhead. What about the militarization of the area, LaDonna?
So from the time we started the camp, April 1st, the helicopters and the planes, low-flying planes, have been here almost daily on a routine. We have the drones that come in the evening. We know they are infrared because they come in at night. They come through the whole camp. And when the people were gathering, the planes were numerous here. The helicopters are numerous here. We have been under surveillance. Right now, today, we have 4 large boats out in the river over by the access site. And of course, with the blockades that we are suffering, the governor of North Dakota wants to put an economic condition on us. If he stops the economics here.
You mean like an embargo?
Yes, to have the roads blocked off.
Oh, an economic blockade.
Yeah, so the roads are blocked off and nobody is allowed access down here. So we have to take an alternate route to make it here. We have police everywhere that are racial profiling because a non-Indian can go through, we cannot. And everybody here understands the drone. So what we've been doing is recording the times and dates of each drone and each helicopter as they come through. And we already know their patterns. They've been here so much, and we know they're photographing the whole area. When we had the road grader down here trying to grade the road, they were like massive. The helicopters, the planes, and the drones were all sent in all to see what are those Indians doing, although we're just fixing the road.
Why don't we sit down and talk about your family history here? Your family has been here for generations?
Yes, my family has been here since 1873 when we were brought across from the east side of the river. My name is LaDonna Brave Bull Allard. My real name is Tamakawa Shtewi, her good earth woman. I am Ihunktawa, Hunkpatina, and Pabaska Dakota on my father's side. I am Hunkpapa, Sihasapa, and Ogwala Lakota on my mother's side. So I'm Lakota, Dakota, but I was raised Dakota. I know the outside world probably doesn't understand that, but we understand it here. And I am an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. I am the historian, genealogist. I work for Tribal Historic Preservation Office as Section 106 coordinator.
We're actually speaking on September 3rd, the weekend of Labor Day. And this is a very important anniversary.
I didn't even know it was Labor Day. This is September 3rd, 152 years ago, the Whitestone Massacre happened, which the people in this community, the Cannonball community, are from descendants of that massacre. We are the survivors of that massacre. One of the things that, we always say is this massacre happened. America forgot they killed us. And we have just spending this time trying to figure out how to survive. So we were the wrong Indians that they killed at that time. The Dakota Wars were happening in 1863. And so the government put up this armed forces to go after the Isante, the Santee. And so they put this military action together. On the morning of September 3rd, our people were gathered, as we do every year at this time. We gather because it's harvest time, the fruit and vegetables are ready. It is a time when we are doing the buffalo calling. We have ceremonies to call the buffalo for the people to come to hunt so that we can prepare the meat for winter. So this is what was happening at Whitestone at that time. And so we have a large gathering of 4,000 people. And I think that's kind of unique. There's almost 4,000 people here. And so we had all of these communities coming in together to go into this trade. And as people are preparing buffalo hides and getting dry meat ready, they are also visiting, making relatives, having marriages. All of these things are happening in this camp. And so they say the soldiers are coming. And our leader said, we have never had an argument with the white people. We have only been at peace. We do not have a treaty with them. And so our people got together and said, we heard that if you take a white flag, they will honor that to talk with us. So they took a white flour sack and they put it on a stick, and our leaders all went out into the to the soldiers to say they wanted to talk.
Your grandfather was one of them?
Yes. So my grandfather was the medicine man. His name was Tatanka Ohitika, Brave Buffalo. So Brave Buffalo was among them with the chiefs. They went out to talk to the soldiers. The soldiers surrounded them, took them as prisoner of war, and quartered them off from their people. And so the people were watching, and just like we are taught, automatically, if there's an enemy coming in, we gather all the children in the center, all the women. People were starting to tear down their lodges. People were trying to move in the chaos. So the first things the women did is they tied the babies to the dogs. They tied the children to the horses, and they shooed the dogs and the horses out of the camp. And then they gathered what they could, and they started running. Well, at the camp at Whitestone, they came down, and there's this ravine. And so the people started making their way down to the ravine. And it's kind of bizarre to us that these soldiers came in just as the sun was going down. And so they were going through the ravine, and the soldiers came on this top of the ravine and this top of the ravine and started shooting the women and children in the ravine. And one of our soldiers went out in front and broke the open so that people can continue running. So as night is falling, my grandma, Nape Hotawi, a gray hand, she was running, and she said all of a sudden she had a sharp pain in her hip and she fell down.
She was a child.
Yeah, she was 9 years old. And she laid on that ground, and she spent the night calling, Ina, Ina, or Mom, Mom, with no answer. Everywhere she could hear the crying and screams, the songs of people dying. And as the sun came over and she could see everything that was happening, two of the soldiers came and grabbed her and threw her in the back of a buckboard. I'm unsure of why that happened, because they went around and they killed the other wounded. Why they did not kill my grandmother, I do not know. So she laid in the buckboard as she watched the soldiers come and start killing the dogs and the babies, killing the horses, killing the wounded. They gathered up all of our property, the tents, the meat, the hides, everything we owned. And we had one section of soldiers sitting down there poking holes in the bottom of our pots. And they gathered all that, and they started this great big fire, burning all our food, our homes, everything. They said that there was so much buffalo meat that they burned that tallow ran down like rivers out into the creeks. And the people ran. For 3 to 4 days they ran as the soldiers continued to chase and kill them. Part of our people came across here. This used to be a narrow crossing where they crossed, and they crossed over on this side of the river to get from the soldiers. And one of the things that we always say at this massacre is they forgot they killed us, and we weren't even the right Indians. So they rounded up our chiefs, they escorted them, force-marched them to the river, they put them on boats, and they took the people to the prisoner war camps down in Crow Creek. My grandmother was one of them that went to the prisoner war camps. And you would have to go do the research about the horrifying things that happened at the prisoner of war camps. But they released us in 1870, and we came back to the east side of the river and started our homes. The Army came in 1873 and rounded up our people and brought us to this side of the river. And when they did that, we figured, okay, we can start our lives. We can do this again. So our people started the communities. They started living again. And my grandma told me that in the 1940s, we were self-sufficient. We planted our own gardens. We owned our own cattle. Everybody in every community, we owned our own homes. And then in 1948, the government made the Pig-Sloan Act, which is the Army Corps. And the Army Corps decided to build a dam above us and build a dam below us. So Oahe Dam is below us, Sakakawea Dam is above us. And they designated us as a reservoir. And so they came and they moved our people out of their homes. They took our homes, they moved them up into the communities and put in these low-income housing. And
you lost millions of acres from the reservation.
We lost whole communities. Whole communities had to move. And so I think with the people, and you know, somebody said, well, did your grandparents go? No, I went through this. I lived here. I remember the trees in the forest. I remember coming down and collecting water to drink from this river. We would come down and haul water up to the house. We drank this water. We lived with this water. We had huge gardens here. This is me. This is not something long time ago. This is me who lived through this. And so they came and they flooded us. They took all our trees, all our forests went when they flooded us. They took all of our medicines, our plants, the things that we survive in. And so if you talk to the people that are my age and older, you can hear the grief in their voice because we still grieve for the loss of this land. And they moved us on top of the hills where it is a more of a clay-based soil, so we could no longer grow gardens. We could no longer plant trees. We could no longer do the things that we did. Then they put them in communities where people were not used to living, and so we have these housing projects now of low-income housing where they could not own. So our communities changed drastically, but we figured we can do this. We can survive. So everybody came. At that time, and I don't know if people understand, at that time when the Army Corps came in, we had businesses, we had stores, we had restaurants, we had the Army Corps and the government bought out all these businesses and they never came back and redeveloped again. So we don't have infrastructure anymore. We don't have the gas stations and the stores and stuff. We got to travel to Bismarck-Mandan or to Moorebridge. So they took our economic infrastructure from us. So we started again. Indian people, we have a system. We're communal people, so everybody shares what we have. And so we started again. And so we're trying to survive. We're trying to live our lives. We are very proud of the fact that our people have fought in all the wars. Each of us every year get up and stand up and say our family's military history. My grandfather was a Lakota Kotak. He won the silver medal for World War I when we were not U.S. citizens. My Uncle John is World War II. My father is Korean War. My brothers are Vietnam. And all of my cousins are in every action that has happened thereafter. We hold some of the highest medals of honor. And so we thought we were doing the best we can with America. And so when they told us that they were putting this pipeline in, but refusing to acknowledge us, if you look at the Dakota Access maps, they don't even acknowledge our nation. We are not black. We're not blacked out like some people make maps and they do the reservation boundaries. We're not even in there. They said they did not have to consult with us. That pipeline is 500 feet from our reservation line. When that pipeline breaks, and it will break, it will hit early Head Start children in 2 seconds. It will take out our elementary in 5 seconds. In 45 minutes, it'll take out our major water intake that feeds water to all the people here. I don't understand why we are expendable in America. I keep telling people, we do our best. We have always been here. This is our land. Why should we fight to live in our own land? Why should we have to do that over and over again? We start our lives, we do our best to live. Why? I would never hurt anybody. I have always done my best to do good things in my community. Why can't they just let us live? We love this land. And half of the time I feel bad because they make us feel bad for loving this land. But most important, we love the water. Every year our people sacrifice. We go 4 days without drinking water so that it reminds us how important this water is. And I ask everybody, do you go 4 days without water? What happens to your body on that 3rd day? Your body starts shutting down. So we remind ourselves every day how important. We say, Mini Wachoni, water of life. Every time we drink water, we say, Mini Wachoni, water of life. We cannot live without water. So I don't understand why America doesn't understand how important water is. So we have no choice. We have to stand. No matter what happens, we have to stand to save the water.
LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, tribal historian for the Standing Rock Sioux, speaking to us on the morning of September 3rd, the day the Dakota Access Company unleashed dogs and pepper spray against Native American land defenders, biting a number of them. It was also the 153rd anniversary of the Whitestone Massacre, when the U.S. Army killed 300 members of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. That does it for our show. Nermeen Sheikh and I will be speaking at the Toronto International Film Festival this Friday night and Saturday. Check our website, democracynow.org, for details. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gaddis, Dina Guzder, Sam Alcoff, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.